The year was 1878, and two sisters were trapped on a train hurtling into the mountains. Their wrists were tied. Their hope was fading. Josephine Reeves leaned her head against that grimy window and whispered to her younger sister Jane, "We'll get out of this." But Jane's voice trembled. "How? Nobody even knows where we are." Their father had just died, leaving them a fortune. And that fortune had made them targets. A man claiming to be their uncle had shown up with papers and armed men. When the sisters refused to go, they were taken by force. What they didn't know. 3 miles ahead, a lone cowboy named Clayton Zachary sat on his horse, watching those tracks. His rifle glinted in the sun. He checked his daddy's old pocket watch. "Right on time," he said. Clayton wasn't an outlaw. He was just a man who owed a debt to their dead father, and he was about to stop that train, no matter what it cost him. But here's what Clayton didn't know. The danger hunting these sisters ran deeper than anyone imagined, and the truth about who really wanted them dead would change everything. The lesson. Sometimes the people who save us appear exactly when we've lost all hope. And real courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act anyway. If this story gripped you from the start, drop a comment sharing a time when help came from an unexpected place. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. And if someone in your life needs to hear that rescue can come when you least expect it, share this with them right now. The year was 1878, and a whole lot of wrong was happening on a train, fighting its way up a mountain pass. Inside, Josephine and Jane Reeves watched their Oregon home disappear. Their wrists were tied, and their hope was fading fast. They were captives on a journey to nowhere good. Josephine, the oldest at 22, leaned her head against the grimy window. "We'll get out of this, Jane," she whispered, keeping her voice low. She didn't want their captor, a big fella named Hoffman, to hear. Jane, just 19, held back a tear and nodded. "But how, Josie? Nobody knows where we are." What they couldn't know was that help was already waiting. 3 miles ahead, a cowboy named Clayton Zachary sat on his horse, Storm, watching the tracks. The sun flashed off the rifle on his back. He checked his daddy's old pocket watch. "Right on time," he said to his horse. Clayton wasn't an outlaw. He was a 27-year-old hand who mostly worked cattle. But a telegram from his friend, Sheriff Harper, had put him on this ridge. The message was short. "Reeves sisters taken. Northbound train. Stop them." Clayton vaguely knew the Reeves family. Their father had been a big deal in Oregon City before he passed. He'd heard some talk about kin fighting over the man's money, but he never paid it much mind. Now that gossip felt mighty important. He guided Storm down to a tight curve in the tracks. He had spent the morning piling up some logs and rocks. It was just enough to make the train stop, not crash. As the train's whistle blew, Clayton got himself set behind some big rocks, rifle in hand. He hoped not to use it, but a gun always made folks listen better. Back on the train, Josephine's head shot up when she heard the brakes grind. "We're stopping," she told Jane. "This isn't a station." Mr. Hoffman jumped to his feet, his hand going to his pistol. "Stay put," he ordered them, then stomped toward the front of the car. The train jolted to a stop. Josephine saw men getting off to check the tracks. Her heart started to pound. This could be their chance. "Jane," she whispered, "if anything happens, we run. You hear me? We run, and we do not stop." Outside, Clayton walked toward the train crew, his rifle held easy but plain to see. "Afternoon," he said. "Looks like y'all have some trouble." The conductor, a skinny man with a gray mustache, glared at him. "Did you do this? You can't just stop a train." "Seems I can," Clayton said, his voice calm. "I'm here for 2 passengers, the Reeves sisters. I hear they're being taken somewhere they don't want to go." A heavy-set guard stepped up, his hand near his gun. "This is a mail train, and we're on a schedule. We ain't got time for—" A loud crack from Clayton's rifle cut him off. The bullet hit the dirt right between the guard's boots. "The next one won't be so polite," Clayton said. I don't want your mail. I just want the girls." Inside, that gunshot threw everyone into a panic. Hoffman cursed and ran to a window. That was the moment Josephine was waiting for. "Now," she said to Jane. She stood up and slammed her shoulders square into Hoffman's back. He stumbled, and Jane followed her sister's move. Together they bolted for the back door of the train car. "Stop them!" Hoffman yelled, getting his balance and pulling his gun. Clayton heard the yelling just as the back door flew open. Two young women with their hands tied ran out. He knew it was them. "Josephine! Jane!" he called. Josephine stopped for a second, her eyes wide when she saw him. "Mr. Zachary?" Before another word could be said, Hoffman was at the door, aiming his pistol. Clayton fired without a second thought. The bullet hit the man's arm, and he dropped the gun with a yelp. "This way!" Clayton yelled to the sisters, moving back toward his horse. Josephine grabbed Jane's arm, and they ran over the rocky ground toward the cowboy. Shouts came from the train as Hoffman's other men figured out what was happening. Clayton had a second horse ready, a fine bay mare. "Get on," he ordered, boosting Jane then Josephine onto her back. He sliced through their ropes with his knife. More gunshots rang out from the train. Bullets zipped past as Clayton swung onto Storm. "Hold on and follow me," he told Josephine. "Keep your heads down." He dug his heels in, and they took off for the cover of the deep woods. Josephine held the reins tight, with Jane's arms locked around her waist. A few more shots followed them, but they were soon too far away. They rode for nearly an hour into the wilderness before Clayton finally pulled them to a stop by a stream. He let the horses drink and turned to the sisters. "Are you two all right?" he asked, his voice much softer now. Josephine shook her head as she helped Jane down. "We're fine. Just scared. How did you know to find us?" "Sheriff Harper sent a wire," Clayton said, taking off his hat. "Said some men claiming to be your relatives had taken you." He looked at them closely. "Is that what happened?" Jane sat down on a log, shaking all over. "Mr. Hoffman came after they read our father's will. He said he was our uncle from Chicago and our new guardian. When we tried to argue, his men just forced us on the train." Josephine's face grew hard. "He had papers, but it didn't feel right. He's no uncle of ours. Our father didn't have any brothers." Clayton's brow furrowed. "That's what the sheriff figured. Your father's estate is worth a lot of money, isn't it?" "The lumber mill and the shipping business are worth a fortune," Josephine said. "And that's not even counting the land." "And now it's all yours," Clayton said. "That makes you a target." The truth of it settled around them as the sun went down. "We can't head back to Oregon City just yet," Clayton finally said. "Hoffman's bunch will be looking for you there." "So where do we go?" Josephine asked. Clayton started to build a small fire. "I know a fella with a ranch a couple of days from here. Matthew Collins. His place is way out in the middle of nowhere. We'll be safe there until the sheriff can sort all this out." As night fell, the fire crackled between them. Jane was fast asleep, wrapped in a blanket. Josephine just stared into the flames. "Thank you," she said softly. "You saved us." Clayton simply nodded. "Get some sleep, Miss Reeves. It's going to be a long ride tomorrow." It was shaping up to be a long day. In the flickering firelight, Josephine watched the quiet cowboy who put his own neck on the line for two women he hardly knew. There was a whole lot more to Clayton Zachary than what you saw on the surface. And even after everything she had been through, she wanted to find out what that was. When the sun started to peek over the ridges, Clayton was already up, tending to the horses and keeping an eye on their back trail. The sisters began to stir, and Jane winced as her sore muscles protested. Clayton walked over, offering them dried beef and a canteen. "We need to get moving," he said. "Hoffman will have wired ahead. They'll be putting together search parties." Josephine helped her sister stand, seeing how pale she looked. "Jane is not used to this kind of riding. Is there a town nearby where we can rest a spell?" Clayton just shook his head. "Too risky. But we can take it easier today and stick to the trees." He looked at Jane with real concern. You reckon you can manage, Miss Reeves? Jane pulled her shoulders back, her voice firm. I will be fine, Mr. Zachary. I will not be the one to slow us down. In less than an hour, they were back on the horses. Clayton led them through creek beds and down ravines, trying to hide their tracks. As they rode, Josephine started asking him questions, mostly to learn more about him, but also to take Jane's mind off her aches and pains. How do you and Sheriff Harper know each other? She asked as their horses carefully stepped over slick rocks in a stream. A small smile touched Clayton's lips. We rode together during the war. I was just a kid who lied about his age to sign up. Harper, he looked out for me, taught me how to track and shoot. His eyes got a faraway look. We went our own ways after, but we stayed in touch. He knows I can handle myself when things get sideways. And what brought you all the way to Oregon? Jane asked, her voice a little stronger now. A shadow crossed Clayton's face. I was working cattle up in Wyoming till about a year ago. There was some trouble. I needed a new place to start over. His tone made it clear that was the end of that subject, and Josephine let it be. Out here, most folks had a past they did not talk about. Even her own father never said much about his life back east. By noon, they had covered a good piece of ground. The thick forest started giving way to rolling hills with scrub oak. Clayton found a spot to rest in a hollow where a spring bubbled up out of the rocks. He spread an old map on a stone. We're right about here, he said, pointing. The Collins Ranch is another day-and-a-half ride, right there in the foothills. Josephine looked at the map, tracing the path with her finger. And what happens when we get there? Clayton folded the map. Harper will be looking into Hoffman and whoever he is working with. Once we know what we are up against, we can figure out how to get y'all home safe and sound and get your inheritance back. And what about you? Josephine asked, looking him straight in the eye. Why are you risking so much for us? The cowboy was quiet for a second. Your father was a good man. He gave me work when I first got to Oregon and did not have a dime. I always pay my debts. Josephine had a feeling there was more to it. But before she could ask, Clayton went rigid, his hand snapping to his rifle. Get down, he ordered in a low voice, pointing to a thicket of brush. Someone's coming. The sisters dove for cover as Clayton hid the horses, then found a spot with his rifle, watching the trail to the south. A few minutes later, 5 riders came into view. Even far off, Josephine recognized Hoffman's heavy build. They were following the creek, looking for any sign of tracks. Clayton slipped back to the sisters. Hoffman and 4 others, he whispered. They're on our trail, but they haven't found it yet. Jane grabbed her sister's hand, her face white with fear. What are we going to do? Clayton's face was serious. We wait. If they ride on by, we will head east into the high country. It is a tougher ride, but it will throw them off for good. If they find us... He gave his rifle a pat. We fight. For what felt like forever, they stayed hidden, watching Hoffman's men search the area. At one point, a man in a buckskin jacket got off his horse and looked at the ground right near the spring, dangerously close to where their horses had just been. Josephine held her breath, hearing every little sound. The whisper of the wind, Jane's soft breathing, the distant cry of a hawk. Finally, after a heated talk they could not quite make out, Hoffman's group got back on their horses and kept following the creek north away from them. Clayton did not move until they were long gone. They made a mistake, he said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. They think we are making a straight run for Oregon City. That will buy us some time. They mounted up fast, with Clayton pushing them at a quicker pace into the rough country to the east. By sundown, Jane was nearly falling out of her saddle from exhaustion. Clayton found a spot for them in a rock alcove that would hide a small fire. As it got dark, he built a tiny, almost smokeless fire. Jane was asleep before she even finished her small meal of jerky and hardtack. Josephine sat wrapped in a blanket, watching Clayton expertly clean his rifle. "You have done this before," she said quietly. "Running and hiding." Clayton kept working. "Life out west has a way of teaching you to be ready for anything." "What happened back in Wyoming?" she asked straight out. When he tensed up, she added, "I am trusting you with our lives, Mr. Zachary. I think I have a right to know who is protecting us." For a long moment, she thought he would not say a word. Then he put the rifle down and looked at her. "I was the foreman on the Blackwater Ranch," he said. "The owner's daughter, Elizabeth, and we got close. Her father did not approve. He accused me of stealing cattle and money." His jaw was tight. "It was not true, but that did not matter. On his own land, a rancher's word is law." "What did you do?" Josephine asked softly. "I left. Elizabeth wanted to come with me, but I would not let her ruin her life like that. So I rode out alone, just one step ahead of her father's men." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I have been on the move ever since. I figured Oregon was far enough away to start over." Josephine took in his story, and now she understood. "You are a good man, Clayton Zachary." He looked up, surprised she had used his first name. For the first time, a real smile touched his face, softening his hard features. "Get some rest, Josephine. Tomorrow is going to be another long day." As she lay down next to her sleeping sister, Josephine watched Clayton's outline against the starry sky. She felt a connection growing between them, something more than just being thankful. And with that warm thought, she drifted off to sleep. The next day was clear and hot as they rode through the rocky high country before heading down into a wide valley. Jane seemed to have gotten her strength back. By the middle of the afternoon, they reached a ridge with a view of the whole valley. In the distance, they could see the buildings of the Collins Ranch. "There it is," Clayton said, pointing. "About a 3-hour ride from here." Josephine shielded her eyes, looking at the big ranch house, the barn, and the corrals. Cattle were scattered across the pastures like little dots. "It looks so peaceful," Jane said. "Matthew runs a good, quiet operation," Clayton said. "He does not ask a man about his past. And his wife, Sarah, is a good woman. She will make y'all feel right at home." As they got closer to the ranch, 2 riders came out from a stand of trees. A group of riders appeared from the trees, rifles held at the ready. Clayton lifted a hand. "It is Clayton Zachary," he announced. "I am here to see Matthew." The riders, who looked like ranch hands, eased up a bit, but stayed watchful. They led the 3 of them toward the main house. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a trim beard met them on the porch. His sharp eyes sized up the whole picture in an instant. "Clayton," he said, his voice holding a Texas drawl. "I did not figure on you bringing company." Clayton swung down from his horse. "Matthew, I apologize for showing up like this. These ladies, Josephine and Jane Reeves, need a safe place to stay for a spell." Matthew Collins gave Clayton's hand a firm shake, then tipped his head to the sisters. "Any friend of Clayton's is a friend of mine. Come on inside. My wife will see you get settled." The inside of the ranch house was surprisingly fine, with polished wood floors and comfortable furniture. Sarah Collins, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, took one look at the sisters and took over. She led them to a guest room with fresh water for washing. "You poor dears look plumb wore out," she said with sympathy. "I will get some hot food on, but you clean up and rest a bit first." Once they were alone, Josephine and Jane looked at each other with pure relief. "Do you think we are safe now?" Jane whispered, splashing her dusty face. Josephine nodded, trying to work the tangles from her hair. "Clayton trusts these people, so I do too." She stopped brushing for a moment. "He put everything on the line for us, Jane. Not many men would do that." Jane gave her a knowing look. "You surely do admire him." "I do," Josephine admitted. "He is not like the other men we know. He has a real sense of honor. And he's easy on the eyes," Jane added, cracking a small smile. Josephine felt her face grow warm. "That is not important right now." Jane's smile just got bigger. "If you say so." Down in Matthew's study, Clayton laid out the whole story. Matthew listened hard, asking a sharp question here and there about Hoffman. "So, this Hoffman fellow wants their family land," Matthew said when Clayton finished. "And you reckon he was taking them north to Chicago?" Clayton nodded, his face grim. "That would be my guess. Up there, Hoffman would have total control, far from anyone who could help them." Matthew rubbed his beard. "Are you certain Sheriff Harper is on the case? I sent a boy with a message when we stopped for water at Deer Creek." Clayton leaned forward. "The sisters have to lay low until we figure out who is all involved in this." "They can stay as long as they need," Matthew promised. "But what about you, Clayton? This is not your fight." Clayton's face hardened. "It became my fight the second I pulled them from that train." Matthew looked at his friend for a long moment, then nodded. "I understand. Well, you are welcome here too. An extra gun never hurts." That evening, after a good hot meal, the sisters joined the others in the sitting room. Cleaned up and wearing clothes borrowed from Sarah, they looked like themselves again. "I sent a man to town," Matthew told them. "He will wire Sheriff Harper and be back with news tomorrow evening." "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Collins," Josephine said. "We are so grateful." Sarah smiled at her. "It is our pleasure, dear. This big old house can get lonesome with just the two of us. Our children are all grown and moved away." Jane seemed to relax for the first time in days. "How long have you owned this ranch?" "Almost 15 years, Matthew told her. "I came up here after my time as a ranger was done. I wanted to build something that would last." He looked over at his wife with a soft expression. "Sarah was brave enough to come with me." "It was not so wild," she corrected him with a loving smile. "And it has been a good life." The talk flowed easy, and Josephine felt the tight knot in her chest finally start to loosen. She found her eyes drifting over to Clayton. In the soft lamplight, she saw things she had missed, like a thin scar on his jaw and the way his mouth quirked up when he was amused. There was a gentleness in how he held his coffee cup. When it got late, Sarah led the sisters back to their room. As Josephine turned to say goodnight, she saw Clayton watching her. Their eyes met for a long moment before he gave a small nod. It was a silent message of some kind, one that made her heart beat a little faster all the way down the hall. The next morning felt almost normal. The sisters helped Sarah around the house, and Jane was thrilled to find a small library of books. Josephine felt restless and asked if she could take a walk outside. "Of course, dear," Sarah said. "Just do not wander too far. The men are on watch, but it is best to be safe." Josephine stepped out onto the porch and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The ranch was buzzing with life. A good ways off, cowboys were moving cattle and smoke was curling up from the bunkhouse chimney. She heard a horse snort from the corral and followed the sound. There she found Clayton working with a handsome bay stallion. He moved around the horse with a smooth, easy grace, talking low and holding out an apple. Josephine leaned on the fence, watching. The big horse slowly calmed down and stretched out its neck to take the treat. There was something special in the way the man and the horse were building a trust between them. "He is a beautiful animal," she said softly. Clayton looked over, not surprised at all. "He is. Matthew is raising some fine horses here." "You have a real gift with him," Josephine noted. "Have you always been around horses?" Clayton gave the stallion one last pat and stepped out of the corral. "Since I was a boy," he said. "My father raised them back in Kentucky. He taught me you can get a lot more done with patience than you ever can with force." "That is a good lesson," Josephine said, walking beside him toward the barn. "It probably works for more than just horses." A small smile touched Clayton's lips. "I reckon it does." Inside the cool shade of the barn, he sat on a bale of hay and motioned for her to join him. They sat quietly for a minute, just listening to the horses moving in their stalls. "Tell me about your home," Clayton finally said. "What was life like before this trouble started?" Josephine thought for a second. "It was comfortable, but we were not idle. After our mother passed 5 years ago, I helped Father with the business while Jane ran the house. He believed a woman should understand numbers and trade." Pride was in her voice. "I can balance a ledger as good as any man. Handle timber deals so nobody could pull a fast one." Clayton just nodded, looking like he expected as much. That explains why those fellas want you on a leash instead of in the ground. You know the business inside and out. Exactly. Josephine's voice was grim. Jane and I are the only ones who really know what our father owned. If we suddenly turned up dead, our business partners would raise a whole lot of questions. But if you just handed over your inheritance to some guardian, Clayton finished her thought, that is right. Josephine's hands balled into fists in her lap. What I cannot figure out is who is really pulling the strings. Hoffman is just taking orders from somebody. My father had rivals, sure, but none that would go this far. Money does strange things to people, Clayton said quietly. Brings out the worst in some. And the best in others, Josephine replied, looking him square in the eye. You did not have to answer Sheriff Harper's telegram. The reward he offered is not nearly enough for the danger you are in. Clayton held her gaze. Some things are not about money, Josephine. The air between them went still and heavy with words they were not saying. She felt how close he was, the warmth from his arm almost touching hers on the bale of hay, and his eyes as blue as a clear Texas sky studying her face. The sound of fast-approaching hoofbeats shattered the moment. Clayton was on his feet in a heartbeat, his hand going straight for the pistol on his hip. They stepped out of the barn to see one of Matthew's men galloping toward the ranch house, back from town way too early. By the time they got to the house, the rider was already giving Matthew the urgent news. Matthew's face was stone serious as he turned to Clayton and the sisters. Hoffman and his crew were seen in Riverton asking about strangers in the area. They are heading this way. Clayton's jaw clenched. How many? 8 of them now, the man said, trying to catch his breath. They look like hired guns. Been flashing a lot of cash all over town. Matthew turned to his wife. Sarah, get the ladies ready to ride. Clayton, in my office. As Sarah rushed the sisters inside to pack, Clayton followed Matthew to his study. His mind was racing, but none of the choices looked good. They will be here by sundown if they ride hard, Matthew said, spreading out a map. We could try to outrun them, but with the ladies it would be slow going. Clayton looked at the map. A gunfight is not the answer. We are outnumbered, and I will not put those girls in the line of fire. Matthew nodded. I have a hunting cabin, he offered, pointing to a spot deep in the foothills. It is hidden well, full of supplies, but the ride there is rough. Can the sisters handle it? Clayton asked, sounding doubtful. There is another way. Matthew rolled up the map. The supply wagon is headed for the Eagle Peak mining camp tomorrow. We can hide the girls inside, cover them up with the cargo. Nobody would ever think to look for them there. Once they get to the camp, they can catch the stagecoach to Fort Collins. Clayton thought it over. That might just work. I will ride along with them, of course. Of course, Matthew said with a knowing glance that Clayton decided to ignore. Within the hour, they were getting ready. The wagon was moved to the barn out of sight. Matthew's most trusted man, an old hand named Davis, was told the plan. The cargo for the mining camp was moved around to make a little hidey hole where the sisters could ride without being seen. Josephine and Jane, now in practical clothes from Sarah, listened as Clayton laid it all out. It is not going to be a comfortable ride, he warned. The road to Eagle Peak is rough, and you will have to stay hidden until Davis says it is safe. Jane looked nervous, but Josephine gave a firm nod. We will be fine. What about you? I will be trailing the wagon on my horse, staying out of sight, Clayton told them. If trouble finds you, I will be right there. Sarah packed them food, water, and blankets, all while keeping up a cheerful stream of chatter to help calm Jane down. The younger sister was clearly scared, but she was holding herself together. As the sun started to set, the whole ranch grew tense. Matthew put his men in smart positions around the property, ready to slow down Hoffman's crew when they arrived. The plan was to play dumb about where the sisters were, giving the wagon a good head start. In the barn, they made the final plans. Davis would leave at sunrise, using a back trail for the first few miles. Clayton had the sisters practice climbing into their hiding spot, just in case they had to move fast. While Jane was with Sarah for a moment, Josephine grabbed Clayton's arm. What if they do not believe Matthew? They could hurt him or Sarah. Clayton's face was grim. Matthew can handle himself, and Hoffman is not a fool. He will not start a war with a respected rancher unless he is dead certain you are here. I feel like we bring danger down on everyone who helps us, Josephine said, her voice full of worry. His hand gently covered hers where it rested on his arm. This is not your fault, Josephine. You remember that. Their eyes met, and something quiet passed between them, something more than just understanding that neither of them was ready to put a name to. He gently brushed his thumb over her knuckles before he pulled away. Get some rest if you can, he said. You are going to need your strength tomorrow. Late that night, Matthew's prediction came true. Hoffman's crew rode in, announced by barking dogs and calls from the ranch hands. From their window, Josephine and Jane watched Matthew meet them in the yard. He looked calm, but his men were placed all around with rifles in hand. The sisters could not hear what was said, but they could read the story. Matthew was polite but firm, shaking his head. Hoffman got more and more worked up, waving his arms around. After what felt like forever, the tense meeting ended without any guns being fired. Hoffman's men pulled back but made camp where they could still see the ranch, sending a clear signal they were not buying Matthew's story. They will be watching, Clayton said when he came to tell the sisters. But they are not bold enough to attack the ranch itself. The supply wagon is our best shot. When the sun came up, the ranch came alive with work. Among all the usual noise, Davis hitched the team to the supply wagon, acting like it was just any other morning. With the barn blocking the view from Hoffman's camp, Clayton helped the sisters into their hiding place. Stay absolutely silent, he told them as he covered them with crates. No matter what you hear, do not show yourselves unless I or Davis give the signal. Josephine nodded and squeezed her sister's hand. Be careful, Clayton. His face softened for just a second. Always am. And then he was gone. The last of the crates were put in place. The sisters lay still in that tight space as the wagon started to roll, bumping and swaying out of the ranch yard and onto the trail. Through little cracks, they saw the ranch disappear behind them, then saw the open pasture land, and finally the trail that led into the woods toward the mountains. They rode for more than an hour, the silence heavy with worry. The only sounds were the creaking wagon and the steady plodding of the horses. Then, without warning, Davis yelled, "Whoa there!" and the wagon jerked to a stop. The sisters froze, listening hard. They heard men's voices, and they were not Clayton's. A rough voice called out, "Morning, old-timer. Where are you headed with all this?" To the Eagle Peak mining camp, Davis answered, his voice calm and steady. "Same place I go every week. Who is asking?" "Just passing through," the man said, dodging the question. "You mind if we take a peek at what you are hauling? Been some trouble with thieves around here." Josephine's heart pounded against her ribs. She felt Jane's hand tighten on hers. It is not right when folks try to take what is not theirs. This is a story about two sisters who are running from that very injustice, and about the good men who helped them. It proves that even when you are outmatched, you have to fight for what is right. Josephine held her breath as a man with a beard climbed right onto the wagon bed. His dusty boots were just inches from her hiding spot. He looked under the tarps and behind the seat. Davis, their driver, acted calm. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked. The man grunted. "Looks clear," he said. "We are looking for two sisters. Pretty little things. You have not seen them, have you?" Davis just laughed. "I have not seen any woman in 3 weeks, but old Mrs. Collins. That is the mining life for you." After the men rode off, Davis warned them to stay hidden. He said those were Hoffman's men, and they might just circle back. The wagon started moving again, but now everything felt more dangerous. Where was their protector, Clayton? As the sun climbed higher, the trail got rough and steep. Inside the wagon, the heat was nearly unbearable. After a while, Davis called back softly. "It looks clear for now. You can sit up and stretch, but keep your heads down." Josephine and Jane came out from under the heavy canvas, breathing in the fresh air. It was a sweet relief from the dust and sweat. "Where is Mr. Zachary?" Jane asked, saying what was on both their minds. "He is out there watching over us," Davis said, his eyes on the trail. "He is making sure those fellas are long gone." Just then, Clayton rode out from the trees on his horse, Storm. "There are two more of Hoffman's men just up the road," he said quietly. "They are watching from a ridge." Davis frowned. "Can we get around them?" "There is an old logging track up ahead," Clayton replied. "It is a rough ride, but it will take us past them. We can still make Eagle Peak by dark." The new path was even worse than the main trail. It was full of deep ruts and overgrown weeds. The wagon groaned and creaked with every turn Davis made. Josephine and Jane went back to their hiding spot just in case. The ride was so bumpy it rattled their bones. By late afternoon, disaster hit. A deep rut caught the right wheel, and it snapped with a loud crack. The wagon tilted hard to one side, sending cargo sliding right toward the sisters. Clayton jumped from his horse to help Davis with the spooked team. They stopped the wagon just before it tipped over completely. The wheel was busted for good. "Are you two all right?" Clayton called out as he helped them climb out of the mess. Josephine was shaken, but okay. Her sister Jane was pale, but not hurt. "What are we going to do now?" Jane asked, her voice trembling. Davis looked at the broken wheel with a heavy heart. "I cannot fix this out here. We are about 6 miles from Eagle Peak, and Hoffman's men are all over these woods." Clayton looked around at the thick forest. "We have to split up," he finally said. "Davis, you take one of the horses and ride to town for help. Bring back men and some tools." He then turned to the sisters. "You two will come with me. We will stick to the trees and go on foot." "That leaves you mighty exposed, Clayton," Davis argued. "We will be fine," Clayton said with a confidence he did not fully feel. "The trees will give us cover." They quickly gathered water, food, and Clayton's rifle. Davis rode off on the stronger horse, promising to be back as fast as he could. "Stay on this track," he called back. "It follows the creek into town." Once Davis was gone, Josephine felt a new wave of fear. She looked at Clayton, who was calmly checking his rifle. He gave them a reassuring nod. "We should get moving," he said, looking at the long shadows. "We have maybe 3 hours of daylight left." The walking was tough. Clayton moved ahead, quiet as a hunter. Jane was having a hard time, but she did not complain. They had gone about 2 miles when Clayton stopped them with a raised hand. He listened for a moment, then pushed them off the trail into the thick brush. "Riders are coming," he whispered. Soon 3 men on horseback came into view. Josephine's heart sank when she saw Hoffman himself was with them. They had found the broken wagon and were now on their trail. Clayton's face was like stone. He reached for his rifle but did not raise it. He did not want a firefight with the sisters nearby. "There is a creek just past those pine trees," he whispered. "If we can get there, we can hide our tracks in the water." They moved low and fast through the woods. Josephine was sure the pounding of her heart was loud enough for the men to hear. They were almost to the trees when Jane's foot caught on a root. She fell with a small cry. That was all it took. "There!" one of the riders yelled. "Run for the creek!" Clayton shouted. They burst through the trees as shouts and hoofbeats echoed behind them. Clayton got to the creek first and helped the sisters down the bank. "Go upstream," he ordered, his rifle now ready. "I will slow them down." "No, Clayton!" Josephine cried. He just looked at her with determined eyes. "Go, I will find you. Head for that big dead pine tree on the ridge." A bullet hit a tree right next to his head. He fired back, making the men duck for cover. Josephine gave him one last look before pulling Jane into the cold, knee-deep water. They pushed upstream as the sound of shooting faded behind them. They did not know if Clayton was safe, only that they had to keep moving. Exhausted and freezing, they finally climbed the ridge and found the huge dead pine tree Clayton had told them about. They huddled together at the base of the old tree, shivering from cold and fear. "He will come for us," Josephine whispered, trying to believe her own words. "Clayton will find us." As the moon lit up the forest, they heard the snap of a twig nearby. It was a signal. "Josephine, Jane, a low voice called from the shadows. "We are here," Josephine answered, her voice filled with relief. Clayton stepped into the moonlight. He was limping, but he was there. He had kept his promise, proving that even in the darkest of times, courage and loyalty can light the way. "Thank the Lord," he breathed, getting down on one knee beside them. "Are y'all all right?" "Just cold," Josephine said, her voice trembling a bit. "What happened? We heard all that shooting." Clayton laid his rifle aside and shrugged off his heavy coat, wrapping it around Jane's shaking shoulders. "Hoffman and his partner kept after you. The third one stayed behind to slow me down." His face went hard as granite. "Well, that fella's troubles are over now." The meaning of his words settled in the cold air. But all Josephine felt was pure relief that Clayton was alive. "What about Hoffman?" she asked. "I lost them down at the creek," he answered. "But they are still out there beating the bushes for you. We have got to keep moving." Clayton led them up the ridge, sticking to the shadows of the trees. "There is an old trapper's cabin about a mile from here," he explained. "It ought to be empty. It will give us a roof for the night." The cabin was not much, just a single room with a big stone fireplace and a dirt floor, but it was shelter from the wind. Clayton took a quick look around. "No food," he announced, "but we have got dry firewood and some old blankets. It is better than sleeping on the ground." While he got a small fire crackling, Josephine helped Jane out of her wet clothes and bundled her up in a musty but dry blanket. Her sister was asleep almost instantly. Josephine changed next, too tired and cold to be shy. Clayton kept his back to her, focused on tending the flames. "You ought to get some rest, too," he said, his voice soft. "Tomorrow is going to be another long day." Josephine huddled closer to the fire, soaking in the wonderful warmth. "What about you?" "I will stand watch," he replied, checking his pistol. "Hoffman is not the type to give up." In the flickering light, she studied his strong jaw, and the weariness settled deep in his eyes. This man had put his own life on the line for them, and the weight of that settled on her heart. "Clayton," she said gently, "saying thank you does not feel like it is enough." His eyes met hers, and a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire passed between them. "It is enough," he said, his voice a little rough. On an impulse, she reached out and took his hand. His fingers, strong and calloused, closed around hers. They sat that way in a comfortable silence, just watching the flames, until Josephine could not keep her eyes open another minute. Josephine moved to the other bunk, feeling a bit safer, just knowing Clayton was posted at the door. He was a steady wall between them and the night. Morning arrived cold and gray. She woke to find Jane still sleeping soundly and Clayton resting with his rifle in his lap. The moment she stirred, his eyes opened, sharp and ready. "Any trouble?" she whispered. He just shook his head. "All quiet, but we need to get a move on." The thought of Davis and a rescue party pushed them onward. A new idea sparked in Josephine's mind. "The stagecoach to Fort Collins. When does it leave?" "Noon every day," Clayton replied, catching her meaning. Safety was so close. But leaving Clayton behind felt all wrong. Before she could sort out that feeling, Jane was awake, and it was time to go. They finished the last of the jerky and hardtack, washing it down with spring water. Their clothes were still a little damp, but good enough to wear. Clayton laid out the plan. "We'll stick to the ridge for about 3 miles, then head down to the main trail." He hoped they would run into Davis, but if not, Eagle Peak was another 3 miles from there. The morning trek was slow and careful. Clayton was always watching, always looking for any sign of trouble. The sisters felt a new strength, driven by the promise of finally being safe. By the middle of the morning, they reached the spot where they would leave the ridge. Clayton held up his hand, signaling them to stop. "Hold up," he said, staring down at the open ground below. "Something is not right." "What is it?" Josephine asked, moving up beside him. He pointed down at the road. "It is empty. Eagle Peak is a busy mining town. There should be wagons and riders all over that road." Right then, the sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed up from the direction of the town. It was followed by a half-dozen more. "Get down," Clayton ordered, pulling them behind a big chunk of rock. "That is not a hunting party." More shots rang out. Clayton's face grew darker with every one. "I reckon Hoffman's men have made it to town," he said at last. "And they are probably not asking nicely where to find you." Jane's face went white. "Those poor people, it is our fault." "No," Clayton said, his voice firm as steel. "This is on Hoffman. You are his victims, not the cause." Josephine straightened her back, her fear turning into resolve. "What is our plan now?" Clayton took a moment, weighing their bad options. "There is another town, Silver Creek, about 20 miles west. It is a tough journey cross-country, but it might be our best shot." 20 miles, Jane repeated, her voice full of doubt. Josephine gave her sister's hand a squeeze. "We can make it, Jane. We have come this far." Clayton gave a nod of approval. "First, we need supplies. There is a homestead over in the valley. If we are lucky, the family there will help us out." With a new plan set, they started the tricky climb down from the ridge, moving slow so they would not send any loose rocks tumbling down. The shooting from Eagle Peak had stopped, which Clayton said was more worrying than not. "They either found what they were looking for," he explained, "or they are spreading out their search." By early afternoon, they reached the valley and made their way toward the homestead. It was a simple cabin with a barn and a garden. Smoke was coming from the chimney. "You all wait here," Clayton told the sisters, leaving them hidden in the trees as he walked up to the cabin by himself. A bearded, middle-aged man stepped onto the porch, holding a shotgun, easy-like. They spoke for a minute, and Josephine watched the farmer start to relax. Clayton finally waved for them to come on up. As they got closer, a woman joined the farmer on the porch, her face a mix of worry and curiosity. "This is Mr. and Mrs. Parker," Clayton said. "They have agreed to help us." The Parkers were more than just willing. Mrs. Parker, a motherly woman with kind eyes, immediately started fixing them a hot meal. Her husband offered Clayton extra bullets for his rifle and gave him better directions to Silver Creek. "There has been trouble in Eagle Peak for days," Mr. Parker told them. "Strangers asking questions, throwing their money around. Word gets around, you know." As they finished the hearty stew, Mrs. Parker packed up a sack of food for them, and even found some of her own clean clothes for the sisters to wear. They were finally leaving far better off than when they had arrived, ready to face the long road ahead. It was a tight squeeze. "The trail to Silver Creek is plain enough to see until you get to Elk Canyon," Mr. Parker explained, drawing a simple map. "After that, just follow the creek north. The town is tucked into a narrow valley. Once you are in the right canyon, you cannot miss it." Clayton looked at the map, memorizing it. "How long?" "A 2-day ride if you take it easy," Parker said. "One day if you ride hard, but it is tough country." Clayton nodded and put the folded map in his pocket. "We thank you. We will get on our way." Mrs. Parker looked worried. "You could stay the night. The young ladies look plumb tuckered out." Josephine was grateful for the offer, but shook her head. "It will bring you nothing but trouble if we stay. If Hoffman's men are looking farther out—" "She is right," Clayton said. "The less folks know you saw us, the better." As they got ready to go, Mr. Parker led a horse out of the barn, a solid brown mare. He told them, "Take Penny." "Model." The farmer handed the reins to Clayton. "The ladies can ride together. You can bring her back when this is all over." Josephine felt a swell of gratitude and started to object, but the man waved it away. "Out here, neighbors help neighbors. Maybe one day you will do the same for someone else." With sincere thanks, they started toward Silver Creek. Clayton led the horse, with Jane and Josephine sharing the saddle. The day wore on, and the open valley gave way to thick forests. Clayton kept a quick pace, trying to make good time before dark. As the sun began to set, they entered Elk Canyon, a deep cut in the land with a creek rushing through the bottom. The trail got narrow, hugging the side of the canyon wall. "We will find a place to camp soon," Clayton said as they crossed a rough patch of trail. "There's a good spot up ahead." The campsite was a small clearing sheltered by tall pine trees. Clayton helped the sisters down from the horse, their muscles stiff from the long ride. While he took care of the horse, Josephine and Jane gathered wood for a fire. The simple work felt good, a little piece of normal in their crazy world. Josephine found herself watching Clayton. He moved with a quiet confidence. "He is quite something, is not he?" Jane said softly, seeing where her sister was looking. Josephine felt her face grow warm. "He has saved our lives." Jane just smiled. "It is more than that, Josie. I see the way you look at him." Before Josephine could find the words to answer, Clayton returned, and they started talking about their plans. Around the small fire, they spoke in quiet voices about getting to Silver Creek and finding the law. "What will you do after we are safe, Clayton?" Jane asked. Clayton poked the fire, sending sparks up into the dark. "My job is not finished until you are both truly safe." He looked straight at Josephine, and in that quiet moment, something passed between them. It was a promise of something more, a feeling that went far beyond their current trouble. A sudden crack of a branch in the darkness broke the spell. Clayton was on his feet in an instant, his rifle ready. "Stay here," he whispered, and then he disappeared into the shadows like he was born to them. The minutes felt like hours. Josephine and Jane sat by the fire, listening for any sound. Finally, he returned as quietly as he had left. "Just a deer," he told them, but he still looked on edge. "We will take watches tonight. I will go first." Josephine lay wrapped in her blanket, but sleep would not come. Jane was already fast asleep beside her, but Josephine's mind was racing. Clayton sat with his back against a pine tree, the rifle resting on his knees, his eyes scanning the darkness. The firelight carved shadows on his face. She must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing she knew, Clayton was gently shaking her shoulder. "Your watch, Josephine." He handed her his pistol. "Just in case." As he settled down to rest, Josephine took her place by the fire. The night was calm, with only the sound of the creek and an owl in the distance. She kept looking over at Clayton while he slept. His face looked younger, the hard lines smoothed away. She wondered about the life he had lived before all this. As the sky began to turn gray, Josephine woke Clayton. They broke camp in a hurry, ready to get back on the trail to Silver Creek. The second day was harder than the first. The trail through the canyon was rough and sometimes disappeared completely. Clayton had to scout ahead often, leaving the sisters with the horse while he searched for a safe path. By noon, they had to leave the main trail and follow the creek. The land grew steeper, and they had to get off the horse and lead her through narrow rock passages. "We are making good time," Clayton said, trying to keep their spirits up. "If we keep this pace, we might just make it." They were hoping to make Silver Creek by sundown. Jane was worn clean out, but she just firmed her jaw and nodded. "I am ready. Getting to town means this whole nightmare is finally over." Josephine gave her sister's hand a squeeze, feeling a swell of pride. "Just a little while longer, Jane." They were just about to head out when Clayton went rigid, his hand snapping to his rifle. "Get down!" he barked. "Now!" The sisters hit the dirt just as the rocks above them exploded with gunfire. A bullet slammed into a tree right by Josephine, sending bark flying into her face. Their horse screamed and bolted down the trail. "Behind those rocks," Clayton yelled, laying down fire so the sisters could scramble to safety. From their new spot, Josephine saw two men up on the ridge. It was Hoffman and one of his hired guns. How they tracked them down was a mystery, but this ambush was no accident. "They are sitting high," Clayton said between shots. "We have got to move before they get the drop on us." "The horse," Jane cried out. "Everything we have." "No time for that," Clayton shot back. "Keep your heads down and follow my lead." They started a frantic retreat down the gulch, using every rock and tree for cover. Clayton moved like a man who knew his way around a fight, always keeping himself between the sisters and the gunfire. For the better part of an hour, they dodged and weaved through the canyon. Hoffman and his man kept on their heels, but they stayed just out of rifle range, pushing them along like cattle. "They are driving us clear of Silver Creek," Clayton figured, as they caught their breath under a rock ledge. "They are trying to run us out into the open." Josephine's thoughts were spinning. Is there another way around? A way to double back? Clayton just shook his head. Not without crossing open country. They would pick us off before we got halfway. Jane, looking pale but steady, asked the question they were all thinking. So what is the plan? Clayton checked his rifle with a grim look. I have only got 6 shots left. Not nearly enough to win a real fight, he thought for a hard second. There is only one thing to do. I will lead them away. You two make for Silver Creek. Stick to the creek bed so you do not leave any tracks. No, Josephine said right away. We are not leaving you to face them by yourself. Clayton's eyes locked with hers, full of resolve. It is the only way, Josephine. I can lose these fellas in the high country and then circle back to town. That is too risky, she said, her heart pounding with fear. They will kill you. They have to catch me first, he said with a hint of a smile. I know these mountains a whole lot better than they do. Jane put a hand on her sister's arm. He is right, Josie. It is our only real chance. The sense in his plan was plain, but Josephine's heart fought against it. The idea of Clayton facing Hoffman alone, maybe dying because of them, was just too much to bear. I cannot let you do this, she whispered. Clayton's face softened, and he reached up to gently touch her cheek. I will see you in Silver Creek. That is a promise. The moment hung between them, thick with feelings they had not yet spoken aloud. Then Clayton turned to Jane. 2 miles down, the creek splits. Take the path on the right. It will lead you straight to town. Stay in the water when you can. Jane nodded, committing it all to memory. We will get the sheriff the second we get there. Good. Clayton gave his rifle one last check, then looked back at Josephine. You all get going. I will make some noise to pull them off your trail. Josephine knew it was no use arguing. With a heavy heart, she touched Clayton's arm. Please be careful. His hand briefly covered hers. Always. Now go. The sisters crept off, staying low as they moved down the rocky creek bed. Behind them, they heard Clayton's rifle cracking fast. Then they heard him crashing through the brush, moving away from them and drawing their pursuers. Hoffman's angry yell echoed down the canyon, followed by more shots. He and his man had swallowed the bait, chasing Clayton instead of the sisters. Josephine had to fight the urge to look back. Jane pulled her along, knowing the struggle in her sister's heart, but focused on their survival. He knows what he is doing, Jane said, trying to soothe her as they waded through the cold water. We just have to trust him. Trust him. Yes, Josephine realized. She knew she trusted Clayton Zachary with her own life, her sister's life, and maybe even her heart. That sudden clarity gave her strength as they pushed on toward Silver Creek. Every step took them closer to safety, but farther from the man who meant so much to them. The sun beat down all afternoon as they followed the creek. Just as Clayton said, they found the split and took the right fork into a tighter valley. Soon they started seeing signs of folks, like an old abandoned box by the creek and a rough trail beside the water. By early evening they saw it. Silver Creek was a clutch of wood buildings tucked into the valley, with smoke curling up from the chimneys. The sisters walked in carefully, knowing the sorry state they were in. They walked down the main street, getting strange looks from the miners and other folks. The sheriff's office, Josephine said quietly, pointing at the building with the barred windows. That is where we need to go. Sheriff Wilson of Silver Creek was a tough man in his 50s who did not waste words. He listened to the short version of their story with a serious face. Hoffman, he said, writing it down. And you are saying this man calls himself your guardian, but has no legal claim? Not a lick of it, Josephine stated firmly. Our father's will named a Mr. Edward Hargrove from Oregon City to manage things until I turn 25 or get hitched. There was nothing about a guardian, especially not some uncle we have never met from Chicago. The sheriff nodded. I am sending a wire to Oregon City right now. Sheriff Harper over there is a good man. He and I have worked together before. He looked at the worn-out sisters with a bit of pity. In the meantime, Mrs. Wilson will get you set up at the hotel. You will be safe there. Just like he said, the sheriff's wife, a kind, motherly type, walked them over to the town hotel. She got them a room, hot baths, and some clean clothes from her own daughters. "That fella who helped you all," Mrs. Wilson asked as she got them settled. "Do you reckon he will make it to town?" A knot formed in Josephine's stomach. He promised he would. The older woman gave her hand a gentle pat. "Then I am sure he will, dear. A man's word is all he has got out here." That night, clean and with full bellies for the first time in what felt like forever, the sisters shared a bed. Jane was asleep in a minute, but Josephine just lay there listening to the town settle down. She wondered where Clayton was, if he was hurt or even worse. "Please be alive," she whispered into the dark. "Please find your way back." Morning came with news from the telegraph. Sheriff Wilson showed up at their room right after breakfast, looking serious but pleased. "Got a wire back from Harper," he said, getting straight to it. "Looks like you ladies kicked a real hornet's nest. Harper started looking into things right after you went missing. The man calling himself Hoffman, his real name is James Kruger. He is wanted for fraud in 3 states and is a suspect in 2 murders. Josephine gasped. "Who was he working for?" "Now, that is the interesting part," Wilson went on. "Your daddy's old business partner, a Mr. Victor Chambers. Seems he has been trying to get his hands on Reeves Enterprises since your father passed. When he could not do it legally, he cooked up this plan to have you declared missing so he could take control." Jane's eyes went wide. "Mr. Chambers? But he and Daddy were friends for 20 years. "Friendship has a way of drying up when big money is on the table," Wilson said grimly. "Harper has already got Chambers. He is sitting in a cell in Oregon City." Josephine took it all in, feeling relief and anger all at once. Have you ever been saved from a nightmare only to face a choice that felt just as impossible? That's right where Josephine Reeves found herself, the shadow of betrayal still hanging heavy in the air. Her main worry wasn't for herself, but for the man who had risked it all. "Is there any news about Clayton Zachary?" she asked the sheriff, her voice tight with anxiety. The sheriff just shook his head. He told her a stagecoach was leaving for Junction City at noon, where a train could take her and her sister Jane back home to Oregon City. Josephine knew she had a duty to her family and their legacy, but leaving without knowing if Clayton was safe felt like a whole new kind of heartache. This story is about promises and the quiet strength it takes to keep them. And it makes you wonder, what would you do? With a heavy heart, she finally said, "We will be ready." The minutes ticked by, slower than molasses in winter. Sheriff Wilson had a deputy ready to see them off, and his wife packed them a basket of food for the road. As Josephine stood on the hotel porch, she scanned the dusty street one last time, praying for a miracle. She was hoping for just one glimpse of Clayton's familiar shape. Jane stood beside her, a silent pillar of support. Just as the driver called for everyone to get on board, Josephine's heart froze. A lone rider appeared at the end of the street. Even from that far off, she knew that silhouette. It was Clayton, riding a borrowed horse straight into the center of town. "Clayton!" she cried out, forgetting everything else as she ran down the steps toward him. He swung down from his horse as she got closer, and his tired face lit up with a look of pure relief that matched her own. "You are alive," she whispered, stopping just short of throwing her arms around him, suddenly remembering where they were. "I always keep my promises," he said, his voice raspy with exhaustion, but his eyes were warm. "Hoffman Kruger will not be bothering you again." The meaning behind his words settled in. "You took care of him," she stated more than asked. Clayton gave a single firm nod. "It was either him or me. I reckon I chose me." There was no regret in his voice, just the steady calm of a man who did what had to be done. "The stage is about to leave," Jane called from the porch, a wide smile on her face. Josephine turned back to Clayton the moment she had been dreading finally here. "We have to go back to Oregon City," she explained. Clayton's face was a mask, but something flickered in his eyes. "Do you want me to come find you there?" he asked. "Yes," she answered without a second thought. "Very much." The impatient driver yelled out a final call. It felt impossible to leave with so much left unsaid. Clayton solved the problem by taking her hand and pressing his pocket watch into her palm. "You hold on to this for me," he said softly. I will come for it soon. It was a promise, a pledge to return. She closed her fingers around the cool metal. I will be waiting. The journey back to Oregon City was a long one. A deputy met them in Junction City just as planned and saw them safely onto the train. Arriving home was a relief, and Sheriff Harper himself was there to greet them. Welcome home, Miss Reeves, Miss Jane, he said warmly. The days that followed were a blur of legal matters and business affairs. Victor Chambers was facing serious charges, and through it all, Josephine's thoughts kept drifting back to Clayton. She kept his watch in her pocket, a constant, tangible reminder of the man who had saved much more than just her life. Jane saw how distracted her sister was. One evening, she finally asked the question outright. You are in love with him, are not you? Josephine did not even try to deny it. Yes, she said plainly. Then why do you look so sad? Jane asked gently. He will come, Josie. A man like that does not do what he did for you just to walk away. But what if he's changed his mind? Josephine worried. What if he decides a woman with all my responsibilities is not what he really wants? Jane just smiled. Then he would not be the man you fell in love with. About 2 weeks later, Josephine was in her father's study when the housekeeper announced a visitor. Mr. Zachary is here to see you, Miss Reeves. Josephine's heart leaped into her throat. She stood so fast she almost knocked over her chair. When Clayton walked in, she nearly gasped. The trail-worn cowboy was gone. In his place was a true gentleman, dressed in a fine suit with his hair neatly cut. Only his eyes were the same intense blue she remembered. Clayton, she said, suddenly feeling shy. He smiled a little. I figured I should try to make a proper impression. I believe I have something that belongs to you, Josephine said, pulling the pocket watch from her skirt. She held it out to him. I kept it safe. Clayton did not take it. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. I did not come back for the watch, Josephine. Her breath caught in her throat. Then why did you come? She whispered. I came back for you, he said simply. If you will have me. Tears welled in her eyes at his straightforward honesty. But what about your life? The trouble you left behind? That is all settled now, he explained. Sheriff Harper helped clear my name. The truth finally came out. I am a free man, Josephine, with no more shadows following me. Hope bloomed in her chest. And what does a free man want with a woman who runs a lumber mill? She asked, a smile touching her lips. Clayton took her hands, the watch still resting between their palms. He wants to build a life with her, to be her partner in all things, even if that means settling down right here in Oregon City. Josephine needed to be sure he understood. You would give up the freedom of a cowboy to be a businessman? He nodded. I would, though I might have to insist on keeping a few horses around. A man needs to remember where he came from. Josephine laughed, a pure sound of joy that filled the quiet study. I reckon that can be arranged. Clayton's face turned serious, his grip on her hands a little tighter. Josephine Reeves, I love you. I think I have since the first moment I saw you step off that train. You were scared but so determined, thinking only about keeping your sister safe. I love you too, she whispered, letting the words out of her heart where she had held them. It happened so fast, but it feels more real than anything. He pulled her in, touching her cheek. Darling, time just works different when you're in trouble. We lived a whole life in just a few days. As he kissed her, it was a kiss full of both softness and promise. She knew he was right. What they had was built in the fire and tested by danger. It was stronger than any long, drawn-out courtship could ever be. When he pulled away, she looked up at him with a smile. Jane is going to be over the moon. She has been on your side from the very start. And what about the big shots in Oregon City society? Clayton asked with a little grin. Will they be all right with a simple cowboy, courting Josephine Reeves? They will just have to get used to it, she said, full of confidence. Anyway, you are a hero now. The man who saved the Reeves sisters. They will be falling all over themselves to shake your hand. 1 month later, when autumn had painted the hills around Oregon City in brilliant shades of gold and red, Clayton Zachary and Josephine Reeves got married. The wedding was a perfect mix of the fancy style folks expected from the Reeves family and the simple, honest nature of the couple themselves. Jane, looking beautiful as the maid of honor, cried happy tears watching her sister marry the man who had risked it all for them. Sheriff Harper stood up as Clayton's best man, pride written all over his face. He had started this whole adventure with just one telegram. The Collins family, Matthew and Sarah, came all the way from their ranch. The Parkers were there too, the folks whose kindness had made this happy ending possible. They even sent a special invitation for Davis, the wagon driver, along with a hefty reward for his part in their getaway. While Clayton and Josephine said their vows under an arch of autumn flowers, the pocket watch sat on a velvet pillow. It was a reminder of his promise, of the journey that brought them here, and the time they nearly lost forever. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said. And as Clayton kissed his bride, all their friends and family cheered. The party afterward was more than just for a wedding. It was a celebration of surviving and starting over. Josephine walked through the room on Clayton's arm, her face shining with a happiness that nobody could doubt. She introduced him to all the important business folks and her society friends. "Are you ready to be a man of business, Mr. Zachary?" asked Mr. Harrove, the man who managed her father's estate. Clayton just smiled, his arm wrapped securely around Josephine. "Sir, I am ready to be whatever she needs me to be. I have gotten pretty good at learning new things lately." Later on, Clayton led Josephine out into the garden for a quiet moment. "Are you happy, Mrs. Zachary?" he asked, pulling her close. "Completely," she said, tilting her head up for his kiss. "But I do have one thing to ask of you for our future." "Anything," he promised. Josephine got a playful look in her eye. "You have to teach me how to ride a horse properly. If I am going to be married to a cowboy, I ought to be able to stay on a horse when the trail gets rough." Clayton let out a deep, happy laugh. "My love, that is something I can certainly arrange. I just hope our next trip is a whole lot less dangerous than our first one." "With you right here beside me," Josephine said softly, "I am ready for any adventure that comes our way." As the sun went down, they walked back to their wedding party, surrounded by the people they loved, their future laying out before them like an open trail. It might get tough sometimes, but it was full of promise, all lit up by a love that had been tested by fire and came out stronger than steel. 5 years later, on a morning that felt just like their wedding day, Clayton stood on the porch of their bigger home. He watched his little boy Thomas trying to get up on his very first pony. It was a gentle horse, picked just for a 4-year-old's first lessons. "Easy there, son," Clayton called out, ready to help. "Remember what I showed you." Beside him, Josephine held their baby girl, Emily, in her arms. Her face was full of pride as she watched their son. "He sits on a horse just like you," she said, "and he is just as determined. And just as stubborn as his mama," Clayton added with a smile, putting an arm around his wife. The years had been good to them. Clayton had surprised everyone by becoming a fine businessman. He brought new ideas to the Reeves companies, learning all about lumber and shipping. But his real love was horses, and he started a successful business breeding and training them. That part was all his. Josephine kept running the family businesses with a smart and steady hand, earning the respect of everyone in the territory. Together, they made the businesses grow and built a reputation for being fair and honest. Jane had also found her own happiness. She married a young lawyer and lived right down the road with her husband and their twin boys, so the sisters were still as close as could be. As little Thomas finally got himself settled on the pony's back, a huge grin spread across his face. Clayton felt that familiar wave of thankfulness wash over him. He was thankful for that one single telegram that sent him on a journey and led him right to her, for stopping a train, for the guts it took to act, and for the love that started in chaos and grew strong in the quiet that followed. "What is on your mind?" Josephine asked, seeing him drift off. Clayton pulled her a little closer. Just thinking how different things would be if Harper had never sent that wire. Josephine answered with a calm certainty. I believe we would have found our way to each other no matter what. Some roads are just meant to be taken. As their son finished his first ride around the paddock, Clayton thought about her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe they were always meant to be, long before Hoffman's wicked plan forced them together. But as he looked at his family, his brave and smart wife, his boy full of adventure, and his baby girl with her mother's green eyes, Clayton was deeply thankful for this exact path that led him to this very spot. He had gone from a lone rider with a heavy past to a husband, a father, and a man the community looked up to. His path had been a surprise, but the destination was perfect. I love you, he said simply, and kissed the side of her head. She leaned against him, her voice both comfortable and priceless. And I love you, always. When Thomas called out for them to see his new riding skills, Clayton and Josephine walked forward together to clap for their son. It was another good moment in the life they had made from the ashes of danger. It was one more bright spot in the future they kept building with love, respect, and a bond that could not be broken. The train that once brought two scared sisters north against their will was now just a far-off echo. It had been replaced by the railroad of their life, a track they traveled together. Sometimes the ride was bumpy, sometimes it was hard, but they were always moving toward a bright horizon, lit by a love that began with a rescue and became something real and lasting. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.